owns the stock of the Federal Reserve banks, and I want to audit them. Well, he died without achieving either objective. And at that time, I myself had not completed my research to find out who the owners were. And I finally found out about 10 years after Wright-Patman died, and that information is in there. And, of course, no surprise that the owners of the stock since 1914 are the big rich, the elitists, the Rockefellers, the Harrimans, the Warburgs, the Schiffs. And, in fact, Governor Clinton, the representative of the little man, is now going to send Pamela Harriman to Europe as an ambassador.
Tell us about, how do the Harrimans, and tell us about Prescott Bush and George Bush. I mean, if this is going to be a conspiracy, it has to kind of go up the ladder, doesn't it? I mean, are these families that kind of work themselves in and then just stay there forever?
Well, that's absolutely true, because in order to have reliable people, you have to have families which continue generation after generation. I call them the dynastic families of the world order, because these are true dynasties. You know, the old monarchical dynasties of Europe are pretty well gone, except for the British royal family. And the reason that they are still in power is they represent the old Canaanites, which go back 5,000 years, the black nobility. And in fact, most of the wealthy families of the world today are, well, I'd say all of them are the black nobility. They're all interrelated. They have arranged marriages to protect the money, you see. And they have common goals. They have a common program. So no one is going to get in there and upset the apple cart. Now, sometimes they marry outside of their family patterns, but the people they marry are playboys. In other words, they could go to the Riviera, they can have their yachts, but they never interfere with the program of the world order.
So we're talking about the power of money, I guess, huh?
Well, it's the power of power, because money is power. You cannot issue money unless you have power. I mean, I cannot hand you a piece of blank paper and say, listen, this is a $100 bill, now give me $100 for it. In order for you to do that, I have to have power over you. So the power comes first, and the money is simply a medium of exchange, a medium of control. And in fact, the money that we have today is an obligation. It's a promissory note, promise to pay. In other words, the government has no money. You and I have no money unless we have gold and silver. What we have are promissory notes, which, by the way, Paul Warburg was so brilliant that in the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, he stipulated, and it's right in the Act, you could read it, that these printed pieces of paper, which the private bankers are printing for their own profit, are then to become full obligations of the government of the United States. In other words, of the taxpayer. They can print all the billions of dollars they want, and as soon as they print that money, you and I owe that money. Not only do we owe it, but we've got to start paying interest on it immediately.
In other words, they can take a thin piece of paper, write a $1,000 bill, print that $1,000 bill, and they have created this money out of nothing. Are you telling me that?
They have testified before Congress that they create the money out of nothing. Because they had to testify that, because where else would it come from? It comes out of nothing. It's bookkeeping ledger entries. In other words, the Federal Reserve stockholders, these wealthy families, will enter into a ledger $1 billion. And they say, now, government of the United States, American people, you owe us $1 billion. And if you don't start paying interest immediately, we'll foreclose on you.
That's the way to do it, huh?
That's the way.
How come you and I couldn't have thought of that game?
Well, we should have thought of it first. Now we're out of the picture, see?
But as my understanding in the Bible, there were two things that Jesus said was an abomination. And the second thing was usury.
That's right, usury.
And is that the reason that our country is so indebted today, because of this usury system by a group of people that print money for nothing, and we pay in bondage to keep the system going?
Well, that's exactly correct. And my mentor, Ezra Pound, who started me on a campaign to study the Federal Reserve System in 1948, and commissioned me to go to the Library of Congress. He said, see what you can find out about the Federal Reserve System. Well, I didn't give a hoot about the Federal Reserve System. I was going to write the Great American Novel, and I had no interest. I didn't even have a bank account.
You have right here.
Well, I guess it is. It's more interesting than a novel. And so I went down there and I found out it was a criminal conspiracy, and I came back. See, Ezra was a political prisoner, held in an insane asylum for 13 and a half years without trial. I finally got a congressman interested in his plight, and that opened the door. He walked out a free man, just like that. You have to have someone to intercede for you because you're dealing with a diabolical government which responds only to force or the threat of exposure. And that's what Congressman Usher Burdick did. He went on the floor of Congress. He said, "Why is the government holding this man?" Well, they had no answer, so they released him.
So you knew a poet by the name of Ezra Pound. He commissioned you to write the first book on the Federal Reserve. He was incarcerated at that time in the United States Penal Institution or whatever. But the point is then Mr. Burdick, congressman from North Dakota, he was the one who was able to have Ezra Pound released. Is that correct?
He was indeed, and that's why you always need someone who can intercede for you, because you're dealing with a diabolical government. If you don't have some way of having someone intercede with you, you're helpless.
Now, Eustace, we have the Federal Reserve System. Does the Federal Reserve System itself, I happen to think that I've been patriotic most of my life, but the more that I see about this government, I'm not talking about the country because I love my country, but the government to me seems more and more diabolical, and I've seen my friends in business, good quality, hard-working, middle businessmen that are not in business anymore, and something has to be, I mean, there was some reason that they're not in business. It seems to me the giant corporations now own the majority of the wealth of the country. Am I imagining things, or is the small businessman, small farmer, small select individual, are they being financially wiped out?
Well, they're being wiped out by the Federal Reserve System through the Internal Revenue Service. Now, I have a friend named Paul Desfossis. He and I travel around the country lecturing together. He was an IRS agent for 20 years. And the program, he told me, the program of the IRS for the past 10 years has been to close down every small business, every independent, privately owned farm in the United States, because it's easier to control people who have no assets, who have to work for a salary for somebody. And they intend
Well, why would the government do that, Eustace?
For control. They want the Fortune 500 to own everything in the United States, to control all business, so that they don't have to deal with individuals. You see, the federal government has no power over an individual. People don't realize that. You don't even have to talk to an internal revenue agent, because Article 1, Section 8 of the Congress says, Congress shall have power to provide for the common defense, that is, raise armies, and for the common welfare of the United States. Well, the United States means the federal entity. So Congress, no federal entity, has any power over the individual citizen. Only the states can deal with its citizen.
You know, looking back, Eustace, in my childhood, and I'd come home, and you'd see in most homes or cities whether it was in Wisconsin or Georgia or California or New York or wherever, you see nice homes with a picket fence around. You'd see a man coming home after work with a lunch bucket, and he was raising 3 or 4 or 5 children. Normally his wife didn't work. He had probably one car in the garage. He had a nice bus system where he could go to and from work. He had a nice paycheck, and he could actually support his family. One person could support the whole family. And there was silver, that was one of the commodities of the exchange, and you had gold, and I guess even partially at that time, but the value of the money seemed to be so strong in comparison to what we have. Now, we've gone from this situation, Eustace, where a man could stand up and feed his family and be proud, to today. We have sometimes 2 and 3 and 4 people working in a family just to support the same lifestyle that my father produced for our family 40 years ago. Now, has the Federal Reserve, does it have anything to do with this change in lifestyle or the way we have to work so hard just to make ends meet today?
Oh, this has been a deliberately engineered program whereby the wife has to go out and earn a living. She cannot stay home and raise the children. They want the state to control the children. In fact, Hillary Clinton is in the White House today to absolutely ensure that the parents will no longer have any say-so on the life of an American child. They're to become wards of the state. They're to be totally controlled by the state. In other words, after a man and a wife has a child, they no longer will have any authority over that child. The state will have total authority.
Well, that's, of course, the most bizarre thing that I have ever heard in my life. But let's take it one step further. Now, we know there's a Federal Reserve System. We know also that it's privately owned. The stock is privately owned. You and I could never purchase that stock. Nobody in America except this little elitist core. They make billions of dollars, and the majority of the American middle class is suffering from it. We owe over $4 trillion in debt, huge budgets. The government doesn't seem to respond because they're paid off. Would you say that they're paid off one way or another, most of these congressmen and senators?
They're all paid off. Well, who did Bill Clinton bring to Washington as his new staff? He got the top insiders, the top lobbyists, the top lawyers in Washington. These are people who are accustomed to earning $500,000 a year. People like that are easy to control because they want to go on earning $500,000 a year, $10,000 a week. And when you pay people that kind of money, you own them. They're never going to object. I don't care. If you tell them, go down there to Texas and murder a bunch of children in a little church, they'll do it.
Now, Eustace, what if we could change this system? What if we took the Federal Reserve and we went back to where our government, with good, solid congressmen, non-lawyers, were running our republic? How long do you think it would take for this country to get back on its feet, be independently wealthy, get rid of its indebtedness, and have money enough so each family and jobs enough could support themselves and live in a substantial standard of living? How long would it take, do you think?
Well, you couldn't do it overnight. It would take about 6 weeks.
In 6 weeks, you're saying if we did get our government back, if we got that Federal Reserve back, and I understand that there's a method we can get that Federal Reserve back. Tell us about that, Eustace.
Well, you see, as a sop to the congressmen who still were not totally convinced about the wisdom of having a Federal Reserve System passed by Congress, the very last part of the Act, Section 34, says, Congress retains the right to alter or repeal this act at any time. Now, all that means is, that language means that tomorrow Congress can meet and say, well, let's buy back the Federal Reserve stock, $144 million, which, by the way, if they appropriated the $144 million to buy back the stock of the Federal Reserve, they would wipe out a $4 trillion debt. That'd be quite a bargain, wouldn't it?
I would think that would be about the bargain of every century that I know of since time began.
And we need a bargain. But that's how simple it is. You see, regardless of all the damage that has been done by these people, by their insidious plotting, by their paranoid conspiracies, that can be corrected. The American people are still sound. I have total faith in the people of this country.
I think they really just need to know the truth, Eustace, and from that truth, I believe that if they knew the truth, that they'd make the correct decisions, don't you think?
Well, why do you think the Federal Reserve bankers control the major television networks? Because they only want their propaganda to go out to the people. They realize that 3 days on television could inform all the American people of everything that's gone on.
Now, Eustace, you and I have been talking briefly here now. In the next couple, 3 minutes, tell us just a thumbnail sketch of what we've learned about the Federal Reserve System.
Well, we learned it's a criminal syndicate. See, the American people know the mafia is a criminal syndicate, but the mafia is not doing the damage to the American people that the Federal Reserve is. So, therefore, we go after this criminal syndicate, we put them out of business, and what we do is we liberate the people. It would be a new revolution.